Um, the news reports about the California salmon wipeout. Wipeout got a good chunk of the story right, but record-breaking heat waves made Northern California rivers too warm to sustain migrating the Chinook salmon, and virtually all the salmon in the Sacramento River this summer have died or will die before reproducing. Any eggs that were successfully laid or the fry hatched from those eggs are also probably doomed. So a generation of the rare and endangered winter run Chinook is virtually gone, and the spring run as well. Um, some of the details were a bit off though, but it's just as important to know that the salmon are facing extinction, not just because of warm weather or climate change, but because of Trump era policies that continue to be carried out by Biden and Governor Gavin Newsom's administrations. Despite the Democrats' the professed rejection of Donald Trump's destructive approach to California water, these decisions are still reversible. It's very late to save one of the remaining marbles that make California what it is, but it's not too late. Salmon are cold water fish, and they basically evolved to begin their lives in the bracingly frigid spring water and snow-fed stream beds. But then they migrate downriver to the Pacific and then fight their way back to the locations of their birth to spawn and begin the cycle anew. California is unique in having 4 separate annual pulses of the anadromous migrating from saltwater to freshwater salmon in a single river. Each pulse or run is defined by the time of year in which the ocean-going adult fish stop eating and make their way from the Pacific and enter the river streams and enter the river mouths and estuaries to begin the journey hundreds of miles upstream against river and stream currents to spawn. Hence the winter, spring, fall, and late fall runs. Although all are Chinook salmon, each population is genetically and behaviorally and ecologically distinct, and it's made up of unique river evolutionary lineages that found particular basically lineages that found particular migration times and behaviors for reaching particular spawning poles. It's as if each subspecies mapped out its own travel schedule and choose its own lane in order to leave each other enough space to travel the same highway. For thousands of years, the winters run destinations after traveling from the open Pacific were springs and small pools of water in the Cascades. But all that changed in the 1930s when construction began on Shasta Dam, owned by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. The fish now lay their eggs farther downriver and below the dam, where the water often gets too warm. One of the Bureau's duties is to keep enough water in the reservoir's lower depths, where it's shielded from the summer heat, so that it can be released into the river as needed to keep it cold enough to prevent extinction of the winter run. The government biologists issued guidelines prescribing the amount of water needed, but as the former squatter Trump scoffed at those practices, saying all the stored water should go to orchards and farm fields, and to use water to prevent extinction, he said, was just shoving it out to sea. His Interior Department pushed aside its biologists and got new ones, who issued new guidelines calling for much less cold water storage. The Biden administration is adhering to the same weakened and scientifically suspect biological opinions, but this year, to its discredit, the California Water Quality Control Board, made up of gubernatorial appointees, signed on to the low storage requirements for cold water in Shasta and the release of water to almond orchards and rice fields. Their plan in effect anticipates the extinction of the winter run Chinook, because the fish have an average 3-year lifespan, and their numbers were decimated last year too. Like this year's wiped out generation by water that was too warm and too scarce. It was the failure to retain and release cold water for the winter run, at least as much as record-shattering heat waves, but that did in the fish. After the winter run is lost forever, the spring run is likely next in line, and then the fall run and the late fall run, and that's it. Is it a big deal? For people who see salmon as simply a pinkish orange fish on a plate, perhaps not. Restaurant menus and grocery store freezer cases are full of distant relatives of the Chinook, like the farmed Atlantic salmon raised in Chile in the Pacific, ironically, and threatening the local government. But saying California can lose the wondrous migrating Chinook, a keystone of species that for eons has enriched the soil of inland regions and sustained an ecological web that includes black bears in the Sierra and orcas in the Pacific, because there still is a pink fish called by the same name, is a little like saying it would be no big deal to lose the redwoods and the giant sequoia, because after all, there are other trees in other places. Perhaps we can give up the western monarch butterfly, also an endemic California migratory species, and also like the winter run Chinook down to its last few thousand or so individuals, um, because there are other butterflies in other states. Perhaps we can lose everything that makes California's national environment special. Whether we do may be up to Biden and Newsom, but on whose watch is one of California's most iconic species may be snuffed out because they choose to follow the fake signs dreamed up in the Trump era. It's all Californians who watch too, and after the iconic salmon, butterflies, and trees, it may be all of us in danger of being wiped out too. So if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, Random Mike, and also RBW King, and also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. And thanks for listening.